Welcome to Life Stories, where we dive deep into real-life experiences and lessons learned. Today, we share the remarkable journey of Ethan Harris, a man who built his business with honesty and integrity, only to uncover a web of deceit at his own dealership. In a bold undercover investigation, Ethan exposes the corruption that had taken root within his company, leading to a life-changing confrontation. Stay with us as we explore how one man's commitment to doing what's right led to the redemption of his business and a renewed promise to his customers. Please subscribe to our channel to start the story today. Ethan Harris sat in his old, weathered car outside Harris Trucks, staring at the gleaming rows of trucks displayed across the lot. The sight of his dealership, from the outside, was a picture of success. The business he had built from the ground up over the last 15 years stood proud in the heart of the city. The envy of many, there was a sense of accomplishment in the air, the kind of pride a man feels when he knows he's created something lasting. Yet, a subtle unease had begun to gnaw at him. For the first time in years, something didn't sit right. Sales were booming, but the customer reviews had become increasingly mixed. Over the past 6 months, some praised the selection and competitive prices, while others, more and more of them, complained about hidden fees, aggressive sales tactics, and how they felt deceived after finalizing their deals. It bothered Ethan. He had always prided himself on building a dealership rooted in trust and transparency. The thought that something might be rotting beneath the polished surface made his stomach churn. His father had always taught him that a business is only as strong as its reputation. Yet, here he was, questioning his own. That was why, on this particular afternoon, Ethan was sitting in his beat-up Toyota Corolla rather than his usual luxury car. He'd swapped his designer watch for a cheap one from the drugstore and dressed in old jeans, a worn flannel shirt, and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. It wasn't just the disguise. It was a conscious effort, a planned transformation. Over the years, he had expanded the business to other locations, and none of his newer employees had ever met him in person. They only knew him through emails and phone calls. He had kept a low profile, managing things remotely. This would give him the perfect opportunity to get a true sense of what was happening on the ground. Taking a deep breath, Ethan stepped out of the car and walked with a slight slouch, deliberately avoiding the confident stride that was normally his trademark. Every detail of his persona, his outfit, his demeanor, even the way he held his body, had been carefully crafted to fit the role he had created. Jack Thompson, a construction worker looking to upgrade his aging vehicle. It was a role that would allow him to blend in, to observe without suspicion. As he approached the lot, his eyes were drawn to the showroom window, where Ryan Mitchell, the recently promoted sales manager, stood watching him with the calculated gaze of a predator eyeing his prey. Ethan felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Ryan had always been smooth, charming, and a little too eager to close a deal at any cost. But Ethan had trusted him, had seen the potential in him when he was first hired. "Welcome to Harris Trucks." A young salesman practically bounced over to him, flashing a well-practiced smile. His enthusiasm was almost mechanical, and there was something about it that struck Ethan as off. "I'm Tom. What brings you in today?" Ethan pitched his voice slightly higher than usual, adopting the role of Jack Thompson with ease. "Name's Jack. Been saving up for a while. Looking to get something reliable for work. You know, construction isn't exactly gentle on vehicles." He gestured vaguely to the trucks, trying to seem as casual as possible. Tom's eyes lit up at the prospect of a sale. "We've got exactly what you need. Our heavy-duty models are perfect for construction work. What's your budget looking like?" "About $35,000 saved up," Ethan replied, knowing this would place him right in the middle of the market, allowing him to observe the sales tactics in their purest form. As Tom led him through the lot, Ethan's mind raced. He paid close attention to every detail, the way the salesman presented the vehicles, the features he emphasized, and most importantly, what was left unsaid. He noticed that Tom kept steering the conversation toward the higher-end models, subtly trying to push them toward Ethan. They stopped in front of a silver Ford F-150. A popular model, but priced just slightly above the budget Ethan had stated. This beauty just came in last week, Tom explained, launching into his pitch. It's got everything you need: robust engine, excellent towing capacity, and our exclusive Harris protection package included. Ethan's ears perked up at the mention of the protection package. That wasn't supposed to be included in the base price. It was an optional add-on, one that customers could choose to purchase separately. The fact that it was being pushed as a standard feature set off alarm bells in his mind. Mind if I take a look under the hood? Ethan asked, maintaining his cover as a knowledgeable construction worker. As he inspected the engine, he noticed Tom nervously glancing over toward the showroom, where Ryan Mitchell was still watching. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. There was an energy in the air, something almost tangible. Ethan had always trusted his instincts, and right now, they were screaming at him to dig deeper. The test drive confirmed his suspicions. As they returned to the showroom to begin the paperwork, Ethan's gut twisted with anticipation. He could feel the weight of what he was about to uncover pressing down on him. This wasn't just a transaction. He was about to learn something that could shake the very foundation of everything he had worked so hard to build. As he sat down at Tom's desk, the reality of the situation began to sink in. He wasn't just a customer today, he was an investigator. A man who had built this business with his own two hands. Now facing the possibility that it might be falling apart from within. Would he be able to save it? Would he be able to restore the integrity that had once defined Harris Trucks? The answers lay just ahead. The investigation had only just begun. Ethan sat across from Tom in the cool, air-conditioned showroom, his heart racing as the young salesman pulled up the paperwork on his computer. The atmosphere around them was thick with the sounds of phones ringing and the occasional murmur of other sales transactions taking place. But to Ethan, it all felt distant, muffled by the weight of what was about to unfold. He kept his mask in place. The expression of a simple, hard-working man trying to make a reasonable purchase. But beneath the surface, his mind was sharp, alert, watching every move. Mr. Thompson, Tom began, his voice a little more strained now. We just need to go through some standard paperwork. The base price is $37,000. And with our premium protection package and processing fees. Tom's words trailed off, and his eyes flickered nervously toward the back office. Ethan could see how unsettled he was. The young salesman clearly not at ease with the task at hand. He was doing what he was told, pushing prices and fees to make the sale, regardless of the customer's situation. Ethan leaned forward, his expression one of mild curiosity. He kept his voice steady, trying to sound like the man he was pretending to be. What kind of processing fees are we talking about? Before Tom could respond, there was a commotion from the next desk over. Raised voices filled the showroom, momentarily distracting them both. Ethan instinctively shifted in his chair, subtly positioning himself so he could observe the situation without drawing attention. The voices were getting louder, and a man, whose worn red delivery uniform bore the logo of a local delivery company, was standing, his hands clutching a stack of paperwork so tightly it looked as though it might crumble. His face was red with frustration. I've been saving for 2 years, the man, who Ethan later learned was named Mark Henderson, shouted, his voice cracked, the strain of his emotions clear. The deal was supposed to be for $32,000. Not $35,000. This isn't right. My wife and I worked hard for this money. And now you're telling me we can't afford it? Ethan's heart tightened as he listened. The scene was unfolding before him like a slow-motion train wreck. Mark's shoulders were slumped with exhaustion, the weight of his family's hopes resting on this purchase. His eyes, puffy from stress, looked like they were about to tear up. Ethan knew exactly what this kind of desperation felt like. He'd worked with families like Mark's before. People trying to make the right choices for their future, doing the best they could with limited resources. But then, out of the corner of his eye, Ethan saw Ryan Mitchell, the sales manager, strut out of his office. Ryan's perfectly tailored suit and his carefully combed hair stood in stark contrast to Mark's humble appearance. The smile on Ryan's face was a rehearsed one, full of the kind of professionalism that masked something far more sinister. His eyes, though, lacked any genuine empathy. They were calculating. Cold. "Mr. Henderson," Ryan said smoothly, his voice oozing with faux sympathy. "I understand your frustration, but these fees are clearly outlined in the fine print of your agreement." He pointed to a document in front of him, his finger tracing the fine print of a contract that was almost impossible to read. "Look, Josh, your salesman. He promised me the total would be 32.000. Not 35.000. This is my family's savings. And we can't afford another $3. Mark pleaded, his voice trembling now. Ryan's smile never faltered, but there was something about it that made Ethan's blood boil. It was the smile of a man who had no intention of doing the right thing. Someone who knew the trap he was setting and was enjoying every moment of it. "I'm afraid Josh is no longer with the company," Ryan said dismissively, as if his departure was just another casualty in the game. "And while I sympathize with your situation, verbal discussions are superseded by the written agreement you signed." Ryan's words were a calculated blow, designed to crush Mark's spirit even further. He tapped the contract with one manicured finger, the arrogance in his stance clear. "Perhaps you should have read it more carefully," he said coldly. The entire scene made Ethan's stomach churn. He could feel the familiar surge of anger rising inside him. He had spent his life building this business on the foundation of trust, integrity, and fairness. Yet, here he was, witnessing a man being ruthlessly squeezed for every penny he had. All because of hidden fees, inflated charges, and shady tactics that had been institutionalized under his own roof. Ethan knew he couldn't let this go on. Not under his watch. Not after everything he had worked for. As the argument continued, Ethan remained calm, his mind racing as he processed every detail of what he was witnessing. He had to know the full extent of the corruption before he could make his move. He had to gather the evidence to expose this web of deceit that had taken root in the dealership he had once been so proud of. With Mark finally walking away, his spirit broken, Ethan turned his attention back to Tom. The young salesman was still nervously shuffling papers on his desk, waiting for Ethan to give the go-ahead to continue. But Ethan had other plans. "Actually," Ethan said, his voice steady, "could I get a breakdown of all the fees first? I want to make sure I understand everything I'm signing up for." Tom hesitated, a flicker of relief crossing his face as he began to prepare the documents. Ethan's gaze never left him. This was the moment he needed. He had already seen enough to know that the corruption was deeply entrenched. But now he needed to understand the mechanisms at play, to piece together how everything fit together. As Tom continued to prepare the paperwork, Ethan's thoughts were elsewhere, on the injustices he had just witnessed. The question that haunted him now was how deep the corruption went. How many families had been hurt by this? How many customers had been duped into paying more than they could afford for a product that was supposed to improve their lives? Not push them further into debt? The answers to those questions were waiting just beyond the next page of paperwork. And Ethan was determined to find them, no matter the cost. Ethan sat back in his chair, feeling the weight of the moment settle over him. He had witnessed the desperation in Mark's eyes. The kind of desperation that only comes when a person has invested everything they have into a dream that's slowly slipping through their fingers. Mark's story wasn't unique. It was a story that could have belonged to any number of customers who had walked through these doors, seeking something reliable and affordable, only to be ensnared in a web of deceit. And now, as Ethan sat in the showroom, the full extent of the betrayal was becoming clear. As Tom continued to shuffle through the papers, Ethan's mind raced. He had to dig deeper. There was no other choice. He couldn't just walk away from this and hope it would resolve itself. Too many people had been hurt. Too many lives disrupted by the unethical practices that had taken root in the dealership. He couldn't allow it to continue. This business, his business, was founded on trust, and that trust had been shattered by greed. "Tom," Ethan said, his voice calm but firm. I need to understand exactly what's going on here. These fees, they don't make sense. Can you explain why everything seems to be costing more than what we discussed? Tom looked uneasy, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted the papers on the desk. The young salesman clearly didn't want to be the one to reveal the truth. But Ethan could see the conflict in his eyes. He could see the guilt, the weight of the lies he had been complicit in. Tom began, glancing nervously around the showroom as though looking for someone to help him. I don't really have a say in all this, Mr. Thompson. It's the way we're told to do things. The fees are added in at the end, after we get you emotionally invested in the vehicle. It's just the process. Ethan leaned in closer, trying to keep his voice low and conversational. But why? Why add all these charges after the fact? Doesn't that seem dishonest to you? Tom swallowed hard, his eyes darting toward the back office where Ryan Mitchell was no doubt watching. Look, Mr. Thompson, he said in a hushed tone. I don't want to get in trouble. But, Dan Mitchell, he runs things here. He has a system. We're supposed to make the customer fall in love with the vehicle first. Then hit them with the fees when they're emotionally invested. If we don't follow the process, we get stuck working dead hours or worse. No customers, no commissions, you don't make sales, you don't eat. Ethan's heart sank as he processed the words. This wasn't just a few rogue employees making poor choices, it was a culture. A system designed to manipulate customers into spending more than they could afford. It was systemic, and it had been going on for far too long. Dan runs things? Ethan repeated, trying to keep the shock from his voice. So he's the one behind all of this? Tom nodded, his face pale. Yeah, he's the one who sets the quotas. The sales strategies. If you don't follow his way, you're out. Just ask Josh. He tried to be upfront with customers. Told them about the fees. And he's gone now. Ethan's blood boiled. Josh had been one of the few honest salesmen in the dealership. He tried to do the right thing. But in this environment, doing the right thing was a fast track to being fired. The realization hit him hard. Ethan had known Ryan was ambitious. But he had no idea the extent to which he had corrupted the entire operation. What happened to Josh? Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ryan, he just got rid of him. Said he wasn't a good fit for the team. Tom replied, his voice breaking. But really, it's because Josh wouldn't play along. He didn't want to lie to customers. And that didn't sit well with Ryan. Now, we've all had to adapt. It's the way things are done here now. Ethan could feel his jaw tightening. He had built this business with the belief that honesty was the foundation of success. Yet here he was, discovering that the very system he had put in place had been turned into a machine of manipulation. It was as if everything he had worked for had been twisted into something unrecognizable. The situation was worse than he had imagined. Ryan had created a toxic culture. One where deceit was rewarded and honesty was punished. Ethan needed to expose this corruption. But he had to be careful. Ryan was a slippery character. And he wouldn't hesitate to destroy any evidence if he thought it would save his career. As he sat in the showroom, Ethan realized that the time to act had come. He had enough information to take action. But he needed one final piece. Ryan's confession. It was the only way to ensure that the truth would come to light. And that the dealership could begin to rebuild the trust it had lost. Ethan turned to Tom, his expression hardening. I need to speak with Ryan, he said, his voice low. Set up a meeting. Now. Tom's face paled even further. But he nodded, knowing there was no way out. He stood up, his movements hesitant, and made his way to Ryan's office. As Ethan waited, he thought of the people he had met over the years. The families who had trusted him. Who had believed in the promise of honesty and fairness that he had made to them. Those promises had been broken by people like Ryan Mitchell. But Ethan wasn't going to let this go on any longer. He would confront Ryan, expose the truth, and restore the integrity of his business. The next chapter of this story was about to unfold. And Ethan knew that it would change everything. Ethan walked into Ryan's office with a sense of calm determination. This was it. The moment he had been waiting for. He had the evidence. He had the truth. And now it was time to confront the very man who had corrupted everything he had worked so hard to build. Ryan looked up, his usual smug smile fading as he saw Ethan standing in the doorway. "You wanted to talk?" Ryan's voice was cool, but Ethan could see the tension in his posture. He knew this was about to end badly for him, but he didn't know just how badly. Ethan didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I know what you've been doing, Ryan. I know how you've been manipulating customers, adding hidden fees, and creating a culture of deceit. You've been lying to people who trusted this dealership. I have the recordings, the documents, the proof of everything." Ryan's face went pale, his confident demeanor crumbled, and for the first time, Ethan saw the fear in his eyes. "You can't prove anything," Ryan stammered, but his words lacked conviction. "I don't need to prove anything to you, Ryan," Ethan said firmly. "You've already admitted to everything on record. And now, I'm going to make sure the world knows the truth." Ethan turned on the intercom and addressed the entire showroom. "Everyone, please gather in the showroom. We need to talk." As the employees trickled into the showroom, the realization dawned on them. Ethan stood tall, his voice strong as he exposed Ryan for the fraud he was. Ryan was escorted out, and the truth was laid bare for all to see. From that moment on, Ethan was committed to rebuilding his dealership, restoring trust, integrity, and fairness. The work would be hard, but it was worth it. The road to redemption had begun, and Ethan was ready to lead by example, ensuring that no one would ever again be taken advantage of at Harris Trucks. Please subscribe to our channel for more life stories.